Oh, it just looks so lonely. Kia ora, I'm Kimmy, I talk F1 in the world's second worst accent, and this is my 3 burning questions for the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix. The way I see it, this weekend's going to go one of two ways. Either Max Verstappen keeps the very tip of his nose in the title fight, or that little inkling of hope that many F1 fans and pundits alike have that everything's about to get more interesting, well, it comes crashing down. As every F1 related Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads and Facebook account has been reminding us this week, Singapore is the only current Formula One circuit that Max Verstappen has never won on. And with Red Bull's historic challenges around Marina Bay, the idea of him knocking that last one off and completing the set before the Mad Ring is added next year, well, it doesn't look super likely. Or does it? Could Max Verstappen finally win the Singapore Grand Prix and really get McLaren shaking in their cute little racing boots? Never count them out is my rule. However, there is a bit of data this year to go on that might indicate Red Bull has been working hard on figuring out their challenges on bumpy, twisty circuits like Marina Bay, and a breakthrough has been made. Now obviously, Baku and Marina Bay are two very different circuits. Baku has a decent amount of elevation change, that epic long start-finish straight, and the twisty bits are even twiddlier than Singapore's turns 10 to 12. Where they have similarities though is in the variety of not quite right angle corners and the bumps. And as we all know, unless you're a new fan, and if you are, then hi, welcome to the horrors, please stick around, F1's worth it, I promise. Bumps have historically been the Red Bull's Achilles heel. But with such a dominant outing in Azerbaijan and Max's second to last qualifying lap on the C5 medium, beating his 2024 attempt on that same tyre in less favourable conditions, Red Bull seems to have figured something out with the way that the car can manage the tracks with a more uneven surface, which is emphasised by Yuki Tsunoda also having a solid outing that weekend when you consider the way that his season's gone so far. And Marina Bay isn't as much of a rough ride as it was in the years preceding 2024. It was resurfaced prior to last year's Grand Prix, and it has given Red Bull a lot more margin in their setup. We love to talk about the Singapore bumps, but the fact is, a lot of them aren't there anymore. Now granted, a lot of Max's success in Azerbaijan was down to the strategic decision to start on the hard compound tyre and his excellent qualifying lap that was the only one to beat out Sainz after the last of the red flags. But the reality is, he was still able to get that car onto pole around a difficult circuit in difficult conditions. And even if Lando Norris beat him around Marina Bay last year by 20 odd seconds, he still qualified in second and he finished in that same position he started. And with fine margins being the order of the 2025 season and Singapore being second only to Monaco in the difficult to pass stakes, this is one where if Max can pull out a magic qualifying lap in a car that looks better suited to the sharp corners and bumpy surface than it has in previous years, as well as Singapore being a bit more forgiving than it has been in the past thanks to the aforementioned resurfacing and that minor layout change in 2023, he could just about keep himself in the fight. Which leads me on to my next question and McLaren. Could this weekend, depending on how the Red Bull performs in qualifying, be the point where we see either Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris break McLaren formation and do something a little bit interesting? Now we all know that everyone can have a bad day or a bad week or a bad month or a bad... You get the point. But Oscar Piastri's less than stellar weekend after such a dominant performance in Azerbaijan in 2024, I think shows that while he's cool and calm on the outside, he's not infallible and is in fact a human being and not a robot made in Mark Webber's idealised image of himself. Oscar's first lap crash 2 weeks ago did seem like a consequence of a fight or flight panic reaction after his false start. Now that's very much speculative, and if it is in fact the case, it's not exactly the ideal physical response for a Formula One driver to have. But it is just one of those things that can happen. You can try and psychologically condition yourself to remove as much of that response as possible, but sometimes your body and your brain just do weird stuff. And that's what it looked like happened to Oscar last time around the block. If that is the case, that kind of involuntary physiological stress reaction isn't something you can practice away in 2 weeks. Then, thanks to Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda's little DRS train, Lando couldn't make progress either, and it kind of had shades of Singapore 2023 at points. Lando was just on the other end of it this time. Is this the kind of thing that we might see more of if the McLarens find themselves somewhere further down the pack again? They've got so used to being at the front that it's almost like they're out of practice fighting through. After all, Baku was the first time all season that Oscar Piastri qualified outside of the top 4. This is the same argument that a lot of people were making about Max Verstappen when the Red Bull really started tanking last year, and look at what started happening then. Austria, Austin, Mexico, see the parallels? And with Singapore a little bit overdue for a wet competitive session, considering how the weather is in that part of the world, this is very much a weekend where we could see another mixed up grid. Ignore the weather forecast, it's meaningless. Those rain cells just pop up out of nowhere and then drop their guts. Come on Singapore, you always promise a bit of rain, but the last couple of years you've not delivered. Last year there wasn't a drop the entire time I was inside the circuit over 4 days. That's just weird. Clearly all of that was being saved up to throw a proper spanner in the works this weekend. Now, before I get on to my final question, a huge thanks as always to my patrons. If you're interested in joining and getting access to my self-calculating championship table, complete with position data for every session, the link is in the description as well as here on screen. If you'd like to support my channel in other ways, clicking the like button or sharing it with your F1 fan friends who you think might enjoy my style of presentation is a really great way to do this. All right. Last one. Is this the weekend that Ferrari might finally come good, or are we reaching the point of the season where the gremlins are just starting to rise up and thwart any chance of a minor comeback? In Azerbaijan, Charles Leclerc was suffering from a power delivery problem early on in the race that Ferrari claims was costing him about half a second a lap, and was the main cause behind him not being able to make progress in the first stint. At the time, they either didn't know or weren't willing to share the cause of it, so hopefully they've figured that one out. Then you've got Lewis Hamilton, who despite the optimism many of us had earlier in the year that he'd get up to speed pretty quickly, has seen his qualifying performances only get worse since Belgium, and now Ferrari has fallen behind Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship for the first time since Austria, and is being rapidly caught by Red Bull. To go from being in a last round title fight in 2024 to having a 1 in 3 chance of coming fourth the following year is a bit of a disaster for Ferrari, and unfortunately has reignited the, frankly, kind of pointless question of whether or not swapping out Carlos Sainz for Lewis Hamilton was the right thing to do. And honestly, as much as I'm rooting for Max to get back into the championship fight and want to see Yuki start putting in some really good results, I also kind of don't want Ferrari to really shit the bed at the end of the season, because that Lewis versus Carlos debate is really bloody tiresome at this point, and it serves absolutely no purpose other than to create bad faith engagement between partisan fans of either driver. It's really fun being a fan of both, let me tell you. The fundamental problem that Ferrari has this season is, yes, in part Lewis's struggle to adapt to the car, a problem that Sainz also suffered at Williams but has been glazed over a bit in recent weeks thanks to his podium in Baku, but also because they changed the car in such a massive way. And there's no way to know the exact details of how that development process went without being inside Maranello, but it's hard not to imagine that the lack of Sainz's feedback led them in a direction that heavily favoured Charles Leclerc's preferences, which they've pushed way too far to the point where even Charles is struggling at times, and thus well out of Lewis's ballpark. No, Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz don't have the same driving style, but it's hard not to see Lewis adapting better to the SF24, or at least what it had become by the end of the season, than the peaky, inconsistent thing that they've developed this year. And I'm not even just talking about a car based on the same concept here, I'm talking about just rolling out the same cars that took the line in Abu Dhabi last year and just letting them ride. I reckon Ferrari would have scored more points overall this season if they'd done that, or at least still be looking at finishing fourth in the championship, and they'd have had more money for 2026 development. Williams is 185 points back in fifth. I'm pretty sure that last year's car would have still been able to keep its head above water with that one. But hindsight's 20/20, right? And I'm just a swivel chair critic after all. So what are you curious about for this year's Singapore Grand Prix? Are you wondering if we're in for yet another surprise podium finisher? Is it Fernando Alonso's turn to escape the curse of the Spaniards this time? Maybe you're wondering if Franco Colapinto can finally get points on the board. Chat about it down in the comments. Thanks once again to my patrons. Don't forget to click the like button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time. Ka kite!